The great hall of the Galactic Council was filled with the sounds of 100 different species talking at once. Ambassador Daniel Harris stood at the human podium and kept his face calm, even though his heart was beating fast. He had been doing this job for 20 years, and he knew when something bad was coming. Hi. Arbiter Velkrath was a tall insect-like creature with sharp mandibles that clicked when he spoke. He stood at the center of the chamber and raised his forearms to demand silence. The noise died down slowly as every delegate turned to watch. The council has reached its decision, Velkrath announced. In the matter of the Epsilon cluster mining rights, we rule against the human claim. The territory shall be awarded to the Corvani Syndicate. Daniel felt his hands tighten into fists beneath his podium where no one could see. The Epsilon cluster belonged to humanity by every law the council had ever written. Human explorers had found it. Human engineers had built the stations. Human soldiers had died defending it from pirates, while the council did nothing. May I ask the reasoning behind this decision? Daniel asked. His voice was steady and polite, even though anger burned in his chest. The Corvani have presented historical evidence, Velkrath replied. Their ancestors traveled through the region 3,000 years ago. This establishes prior claim under Section 447 of the Colonial Charter. Soft murmur spread through the chamber. Everyone knew what this really was. The Corvani had paid bribes to half the council members. Their so-called evidence was fake, and everyone in the room understood this simple truth. But no one spoke against it. No one challenged the obvious lie. Daniel turned to look at the species he had thought were friends. The Meridian Republic sat to his left. Humanity had sent 10,000 soldiers to save their homeworld during the Plague Wars. Those soldiers had fought and bled, and died so that the Meridians could survive. Now the Meridian ambassador was looking at his feet and refusing to meet Daniel's eyes. The Thelvari communion was on his right. They had signed friendship treaties with Earth. They had promised to stand with humanity in times of trouble. Their ambassador was suddenly very interested in something on her datapad. Daniel understood everything in that moment. Humanity had no friends here. They had only users who smiled and took what humans offered and gave nothing back. His aide, Katie Morrison, was a young woman with brown hair and worried eyes. She leaned close to whisper to him, "Ambassador, we should file an appeal. The process takes time, but we can fight this through proper channels." "No," Daniel said quietly. "We will not appeal. But sir, the Epsilon cluster represents 12% of our mining output. We cannot simply let them take it." Daniel did not answer her. Instead, he did something that no ambassador had done in 300 years of council history. He stepped away from his podium and walked to the center of the chamber floor. Every eye in the room turned to watch him. The murmuring stopped completely. Even Velkrath seemed confused by this break in protocol. "For 200 years, Daniel began, his voice strong and clear, humanity has been a member of this council. We followed your rules. We obeyed your laws. We paid your taxes and fees and tariffs without complaint." He turned slowly, looking at each delegation in turn. "When the Void Reapers threatened to destroy everything, who answered the call? Humanity sent its fleets. We sent our sons and daughters to fight and die in a war that was not ours. 60,000 humans never came home from that war. They gave their lives for a galaxy that apparently feels no gratitude." The Meridian ambassador shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Several other delegates looked away. "Shared our technology freely," Daniel continued. "Our medical advances saved billions of lives on worlds we had never even visited. Our engineers built the systems that keep half your planets running. Our teachers educated your children. Our merchants brought prosperity to your economies." He paused and let the silence grow heavy. "And what did we receive in return? Our colonies were taxed until they could barely survive. Our ships were stopped and searched on false charges. Our people were treated as lesser beings in stations that human hands had built." High Arbiter Velkrath's mandibles clicked with irritation. "Ambassador Harris, this behavior is completely inappropriate. Return to your podium immediately or face sanctions." Daniel looked directly at the High Arbiter and did not move. "I will not return to my podium," he said, "because I am leaving this chamber and I am never coming back." As of this moment, the United Earth government formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. Every treaty is cancelled. Every agreement is void. Every obligation is ended. For a long moment, nobody moved or spoke. The delegates stared at Daniel as if he had suddenly grown a second head. Then the chamber exploded into chaos. "Cannot do this," shouted the Corvani ambassador. His purple scales had turned dark with anger. "The withdrawal process requires 10 standard years in approval from the full council. This is illegal." "Then take us to court," Daniel replied calmly. "Oh wait, your courts only work because human legal experts designed them." "Good luck with that. This is madness," cried another delegate. "You will destroy yourselves without council support." Daniel actually laughed at this. It was not a happy sound. Destroy ourselves? We existed for thousands of years before we ever met any of you. We built civilizations and crossed oceans and reached for the stars all on our own. We do not need the council. But I think very soon you will discover just how much the council needs us. He turned and walked toward the massive doors at the end of the chamber. Katie scrambled to gather their belongings and follow him. "You are making a terrible mistake," Velcroth called out. "Humanity will regret this decision." Daniel stopped at the doors and looked back one final time at the assembled delegates of the galaxy. "No," he said. "The mistake was ever trusting any of you. Goodbye." The doors closed behind him with a sound like thunder, and the chamber fell into stunned silence. 3 weeks later, the last human ship departed from council space. Daniel stood at the observation window of the diplomatic vessel Endurance and watched the great station of Nexus Prime grow smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among the stars. Katie stood beside him with a datapad full of angry messages from dozens of council worlds. "They are threatening sanctions," she reported. "Economic penalties, trade restrictions. Some are even talking about military action." "Let them talk," Daniel said. "Let them threaten. Words are all they have. What do we do now, Ambassador?" Daniel watched the stars for a long moment before answering. "Oh, we go home. We close our borders. We take care of our own people. And we wait. Wait for what?" He turned away from the window, and there was something hard and cold in his eyes that Katie had never seen before. "We wait for them to realize what they have lost. We wait for the systems we built to start failing. We wait for the peace we maintained to start crumbling. And when they come begging for us to return, we will be ready." Katie was quiet for a moment. "And if they do not come begging?" Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth in it.
"It will.
"It might take months, or it might take years, but they will. The galaxy does not know how to function without humanity. They just do not realize it yet." The ship turned toward Earth and engaged its faster-than-light drive. Behind them, the great galactic civilization continued on, confident and proud. Completely unaware that the foundation beneath their feet had just been pulled away, the silence of human withdrawal had begun. And soon the entire galaxy would learn what that silence truly meant. 6 months passed. After humanity closed its borders and the galaxy began to notice that something was very wrong on the agricultural world of Harvest Prime, Administrator Yulthax stood in her control room and watched her screens flash red with warning lights. She was a tall creature with gray skin and 3 eyes that blinked rapidly when she was stressed. Right now, all 3 eyes were blinking constantly. "What is happening?" she demanded from her technical staff. "Why are the farming systems failing?" Her chief technician was a nervous young male who kept wringing his 4 hands together. "The automated harvesters have stopped responding to commands. The irrigation network is sending water to the wrong fields. The seed distribution system thinks it is winter when it is actually summer. Then fix it." Yulthak shouted. "Cannot," the technician admitted. "These systems were designed by human engineers. They use encryption codes that only human-certified personnel can access. We have tried everything, but the machines will not accept our commands." Oelthax felt her stomachs twist with fear. Harvest Prime was one of the most important food producers in the galaxy. 32 different worlds depended on the crops grown here. Without the automated systems working properly, they could produce maybe a quarter of their normal output. Contact the human contractors, she ordered. Pay them whatever they want, K Administrator. There are no human contractors to contact. They have all returned to Earth space. Their communication channels are closed. Their offices are empty. They are simply gone. Yule Fox sank into her chair and stared at the flashing warning lights. For the first time in her long career, she had no idea what to do. Similar scenes were happening across the entire galaxy. On Station Kalos, the largest medical facility in 3 sectors, Dr. Velmuth faced a nightmare. The regeneration tanks that could heal almost any injury had locked themselves down. Their software licenses had expired, and the human company that owned the technology was no longer accepting renewal requests. We have 600 patients waiting for treatment, his assistant reported. Some of them will die without access to the tanks. Send another message to the company headquarters on Earth, Dr. Velmuth ordered. I have sent 47 messages already. The only response is an automated recording that says human commercial operations in council space have been suspended indefinitely. Dr. Velmuth looked at the rows of patients lying in beds, waiting for treatment that might never come. He had trained for decades to save lives. Now he could do nothing but watch people suffer, because a machine refused to obey him. The military forces of the galaxy discovered their own problems. Commander Thelrak of the Meridian Defense Fleet was conducting a routine patrol when his navigation officer reported something disturbing. Sir, our star charts are no longer updating. The last refresh was 6 months ago. Use the backup systems, Thelrak ordered. These are the backup systems, Commander. The primary systems failed 2 months ago. Both networks rely on human-maintained databases for current information. Thelrak felt a chill run down his spine. Space was not static. Stars moved. Asteroid fields shifted. New hazards appeared while old ones disappeared. Flying with outdated charts was like walking blindfolded through a minefield. How many ships in the fleet are affected? All of them, Commander. Every vessel in the Meridian Navy uses the same navigation systems. Thelrak realized that his entire fleet had become effectively blind. They could still travel, but they had no reliable way of knowing what dangers lay ahead. One wrong jump could send a ship straight into a gravity well or an uncharted debris field. The economic systems of the galaxy suffered perhaps the worst damage of all. Human banking institutions had served as neutral middlemen for interspecies commerce for over a century. They handled transactions between species that did not trust each other. They guaranteed payments and verified credits and kept the whole complex machine of galactic trade running smoothly. Without them, everything fell apart. The Thelvari tried to buy supplies from the Corvani, but the Corvani did not trust Thelvari's currency. The Meridians tried to sell manufactured goods to the Hive Collective, but there was no neutral party to hold the payments in escrow. Trade deals that had worked perfectly for generations suddenly became impossible. On the Corvani homeworld, First Minister Kethral called an emergency meeting of his advisors. He was furious and frightened in equal measure. Our economy has collapsed by 40% in 6 months, he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. How is this possible? His economic advisor was an old female with faded purple scales who had served 3 different first ministers. She spoke carefully because she knew her words would not be welcome. The humans were more important than anyone realized. They were woven into everything. Their technology runs our factories. Their software controls our transportation. Their banking handles our trade. When they left, they took all of it with them. Then we will take it back by force, Kethral declared. Send the war fleet to human space. Make them return. The military advisor shook his head slowly. First Minister, our war fleet is not capable of that mission. 30% of our ships are already unable to fly because they need human-manufactured parts that we can no longer obtain. The ships that can still operate use human-designed weapon systems that are starting to malfunction. You are telling me we cannot even threaten them? I am telling you that if we attacked Earth tomorrow, we would lose. Badly. Humanity has been preparing for independence for decades. We have been dependent on them for just as long. The math is simple, and it does not favor us. Kethral sat down heavily. He was the most powerful leader of one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, and he was completely helpless. While the galaxy struggled, humanity thrived. President Laura Bradley addressed the United Earth Assembly with confidence in her voice. "Our withdrawal from the Council has been a complete success," she announced. "Without their tariffs and regulations strangling our economy, trade within human space has increased by 30%. Our people are prospering." Chief Economic Advisor Nathan Cole presented charts showing growth in every sector. "The resources we use to spend maintaining Council infrastructure are now being invested in our own worlds. Human citizens are seeing improvements in their daily lives for the first time in decades." Military Chief Peter Grant gave his own report. "Our borders are completely secure. Several species have sent scout ships to test our defenses. All of them have been turned away without incident. No one wants to fight us directly." President Bradley nodded with satisfaction. "And the Council? How are they managing without us?" "Badly," Nathan replied with a small smile. "Very badly indeed. Their systems are failing. Their economy is crashing. Their military readiness is declining by the day. We are receiving desperate messages from dozens of worlds begging for humanitarian assistance. And our response? Silence." "As you ordered, Madam President." Complete and total silence. Laura Bradley looked out the window at the blue sky of Earth. Somewhere out there in the darkness of space, a galaxy that had betrayed humanity was learning a painful lesson. "Let them suffer a while longer," she said quietly. "Let them truly understand what they did when they turned their backs on us. When they have suffered enough, when they are ready to treat us as equals instead of servants, then we will talk. If they never reach that point," President Bradley turned back to her advisors with steel in her eyes, "then they will continue to suffer. We offered them partnership, and they chose betrayal. Now they will live with the consequences of that choice. Humanity will be just fine either way." The silence continued. And across the galaxy, the slow collapse accelerated with each passing day. 1 year after humanity closed its borders, the first wars began. The Thelvari Communion and the Hive Collective had hated each other for centuries. They fought over territory and resources and ancient insults that nobody could even remember anymore. The only thing that had kept them from destroying each other was the Galactic Council and more. Importantly, the knowledge that humanity would step in to stop any major conflict. Now the Council was powerless, and humanity was gone. There was nothing holding the old enemies back. Admiral Shenra of the Thelvar fleet stood on the bridge of her flagship and gave the order she had waited her whole life to give. "All ships, commence attack. Destroy everything in the Hive border systems. Leave nothing standing." 300 warships jumped into Hive collective space and opened fire. The first planet they hit was a mining colony with 2 million workers. The Thelvari did not bother with precision strikes. They simply bombarded the surface until nothing was left alive. The Hive Collective responded with fury. Their ships were older and slower, but they had numbers on their side. Wave after wave of vessels poured out of their core systems, crashing against the Thelvari lines like an ocean against rocks. Within 3 weeks, 5 star systems were burning. Billions of beings were dead or dying. Refugee ships fled in every direction, desperately seeking safety that did not exist. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions to address the crisis. High Arbiter Velcroth stood before the remaining delegates and pleaded for calm. "We must work together to stop this madness," he declared. "The Council will mediate a ceasefire between the Thelvari and the Hive Collective." The Thelvari ambassador laughed in his face. "Mediate? With what authority? Your council is a joke. You have no power to enforce anything. My people will take what is rightfully ours, and no one can stop us." The Hive Collective representative made a sound like grinding metal that passed for anger in her species. "The Collective does not negotiate with murderers. We will fight until every Thelvari world is ash." Velcroth tried to speak again, but both delegations walked out of the chamber. He stood alone at his podium, realizing that everything he had built, his life around, was crumbling to dust. War between the Thelvari and the Hive was only the Beginning, the Meridian Republic had been the most stable democracy in the galaxy for 300 years. Their government was fair and their people were content. But the economic collapse had changed everything. Factories closed because they could not get human parts. Workers lost their jobs by the millions. Food became scarce as the agricultural systems failed. People who had lived comfortable lives suddenly found themselves hungry and desperate. Protests began in the capital city. At first, they were peaceful gatherings of citizens asking their government for help. But the government had no help to give. They could not fix systems they did not understand. They could not restart trade that depended on humans who were no longer there. The protests turned violent. Buildings burned. Police fought crowds in the streets. The elected president went on broadcast to beg for patience. But someone threw a bomb at the government building while she was speaking. She survived, but 30 of her staff did not. A military general named Kolveth saw his opportunity. He gathered loyal troops and marched on the capital. The president fled in the night, and by morning Kolveth had declared himself supreme commander of the Meridian Republic. "The old government failed you," he announced to the people. "They trusted the humans, and the humans abandoned us. They trusted the council, and the council betrayed us. I will trust no one but Meridian strength. We will rebuild by ourselves." His words sounded good, but his actions were brutal. Anyone who questioned him disappeared. Anyone who mentioned the old democracy was arrested. The Meridian Republic, once a beacon of freedom, became a military dictatorship overnight, and still things got worse. Pirates and raiders had always existed in the dark corners of space. They preyed on weak ships and undefended colonies. But for decades, humanity had kept them in check. Human patrol ships guarded the major trade routes. Human military bases provided safe harbors for merchants. Human intelligence networks tracked criminal fleets and warned potential targets. Now the patrols were gone. The bases were empty. The warnings had stopped coming. The pirates realized they had nothing to fear anymore. They came out of hiding by the thousands. Entire fleets of raider ships descended on the shipping lanes like hungry wolves finding an unguarded flock. Trade that had not already died from the economic collapse was murdered by pirate guns. Merchant captains refused to fly because the risk was too high. Supplies stopped moving between worlds. Planets that depended on imports began to starve. On Nexus Prime, the Great Council building stood nearly empty. More than half the member species had withdrawn their ambassadors. Some could no longer afford to maintain diplomatic presence. Others were too busy fighting wars, or putting down rebellions, or simply trying to survive. Velcroth walked through the silent halls where once 1,000 voices had debated the future of the galaxy. His carapace had cracked with stress and age. His mandibles moved constantly in nervous patterns he could not control. A young aide found him standing in the main chamber, staring at the empty podiums. There is a transmission from the Outer Rim. Another 3 systems have declared independence from the Council. Of course they have, Velcroth said quietly. Why would they stay? We offer them nothing. We protect them from nothing. We are nothing, sir. What should we do? Velcroth did not answer for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I stood in this chamber and watched humanity walk away. I told them they were making a mistake. I told them they would regret leaving. He made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. I was the one who was wrong. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew what would happen without them. And they let it happen anyway because we deserved it. In the refugee camps that had sprung up in neutral space, beings from 100 different worlds huddled together in misery. They had fled wars and famines and collapses. They had nowhere to go and no one to help them. A young Corvani named Selthan sat in a crowded shelter and composed a message on a battered communication device. He had been a student once, studying human literature at a university that no longer existed. He had admired humanity's stories about hope and resilience and never giving up. Now, his world was starving because his leaders had stolen from the humans and the humans had left. He had no hope of his own anymore. But maybe the humans still had some to spare. He typed slowly, choosing each word with care. To any human who receives this message, my name is Selthan. I am nobody important. I am just a young person who made the mistake of being born on a world ruled by fools. My people wronged your people, and I am sorry. I know that does not mean much, but I want you to know that not all of us supported what our leaders did. Some of us admired you. Some of us wanted to be your friends. If there is any kindness left in your hearts, please help us. Not because we deserve it. We do not deserve anything. Help us because that is who you are. That is what makes you human. He sent the message toward Earth space, knowing it would probably never be read. It joined millions of other desperate pleas crying out into the void, somewhere on Earth. In a quiet monitoring station, a young technician named Amy Patterson saw the message arrive. She read it twice and felt something twist in her chest. Then, she forwarded it to her supervisors with a simple note attached. Maybe we should start listening. The supervisors read the message. They forwarded it higher. And somewhere in the halls of power, first small cracks began to form in humanity's wall of silence. 2 years after humanity walked away from the galaxy, a single human ship appeared at the edge of council space. It was not a warship. It carried no weapons that anyone could detect. It was a simple diplomatic vessel named Horizon. And it moved slowly through space as if it had all the time in the universe. The news spread faster than light itself. Within hours, every government that still functioned had sent representatives, racing toward the neutral station where the human ship had docked. They came in fast cruisers and slow freighters and everything in between. They came because this was the first sign of hope anyone had seen in 2 terrible years. The station was a battered old trading post called Haven's Rest. It had survived the chaos because it was too small and too poor for anyone to bother destroying. Now it suddenly found itself hosting the most important meeting in galactic history. Daniel Harris walked down the boarding ramp of the Horizon and stepped onto the station deck. He looked older than he had 2 years ago. His hair had gone gray at the temples and deep lines marked his face, but his eyes were the same, sharp and watchful and missing nothing. Katie Morrison walked beside him. She was no longer a nervous young aide. 2 years of watching the galaxy burn had hardened her into something stronger. They made their way to the station's largest meeting room. It was a shabby space with flickering lights and seats that did not match, but it was packed with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Daniel saw familiar faces in the crowd. The Corvani ambassador who had gloated over stealing the Epsilon cluster, the Meridian delegates who had looked away when humanity needed them, the Thelvari who had broken their treaties without a second thought. And at the front of the room stood High Arbiter Velkrith. He looked like a shadow of his former self. His carapace was cracked in a dozen places. His antennae drooped with exhaustion. The proud leader who had once dismissed human concerns now stood hunched and broken. Daniel walked to the center of the room and stood facing the assembled delegates. He did not speak. He simply waited. The silence stretched on for a long, uncomfortable moment. Finally, Velkrath stepped forward. His voice was hoarse and weak. "Ambassador Harris, you came. You called," Daniel replied simply. After 2 years of silence, the council sent a formal request for talks. "So here I am." "We are grateful," Velkrath said. "More grateful than words can express. I did not come for gratitude. I came to listen. So speak." Velkrath looked around at the other delegates. They nodded encouragement, but none of them wanted to be the first to say what needed to be said. So the High Arbiter swallowed his pride and spoke the words himself. "We were wrong. The Council was wrong. Everything we did to humanity was wrong. We betrayed you, and we have paid the price for that betrayal." "Yes," Daniel agreed. "You have. Billions have died," Velkrith continued. His voice cracked with emotion. "Wars rage across a dozen sectors. Our economies are destroyed. Our governments have fallen. Our people are starving and we cannot help them. No. We have been watching." The statement sent a ripple of surprise through the crowd. The Corvani ambassador pushed forward. "You have been watching? You saw us suffer, and did nothing. Daniel turned to face him with cold eyes. I remember you. You stood in the council chamber and demanded the Epsilon cluster. You bribed officials and forged documents and stole what was ours. How are those mining operations working out for you? The Corvanus scales flushed dark with shame. The Epsilon cluster had proven worthless without human extraction technology. His people had gained nothing but the hatred of the one species that might have helped them. We made a mistake, he admitted quietly. You made many mistakes. All of you did. Daniel looked around the room. For 2 centuries, humanity tried to be your partners. We shared everything we had. We asked only for fairness and respect. You gave us neither. You used us and mocked us and betrayed us the moment you thought you could get away with it. No one argued. No one could. So yes, Daniel continued, we watched you suffer. We watched your civilization tear itself apart. Some of us felt satisfaction. Some felt sorrow. But none of us felt surprise. We knew this would happen. We warned you this would happen. And you did not listen. Velcrath lowered his head. We are listening now. Please, Ambassador Harris, tell us what we must do. We will agree to anything. Daniel studied the broken High Arbiter for a long moment. Then he gestured to Katie. She stepped forward with a datapad and handed it to Velcroth. These are our terms, Daniel said. Read them carefully. They are not suggestions. They are not starting points for negotiation. They are absolute requirements. Accept them all, and humanity will return. Reject any of them, and we leave forever. Velcrath began reading. As his eyes moved down the document, his antennae rose higher. And higher with shock, these terms would give humanity veto power. Overall council decisions, yes, human. Law would take priority over council law, everywhere humans. Operate, yes. You would control all major trade routes and communication. Networks, yes. This is not partnership, Velcroth said slowly. This is surrender. You are asking us to make humanity the supreme power in the galaxy. I am not asking. I am telling. You had 200 years of partnership. You proved you could not handle it. You proved you could not treat us fairly when we were equals. So now we will not be equals. Now humanity will lead and you will follow. And if we refuse, then we go home and close our borders again. And in another 2 years there will be no one left to refuse anything? The room was completely silent. Every delegate understood the choice before them. They could accept human dominance, or they could watch their civilizations die. There was no third option. The Corvani ambassador spoke first. My people accept. Then the Meridian representative. The Republic accepts. One by one the voices came. The Thelvari. The Hive Collective. Species that had fought bitter wars against each other now agreed on this one thing. They would accept any terms that brought humanity back. Finally, only Velcrath remained silent. He stood holding the datapad with trembling limbs. His whole life had been dedicated to the ideal of equal partnership between species. Now he was being asked to abandon that ideal completely. High Arbiter, Daniel said quietly, the galaxy needs an answer. Velcrath looked up at the human who had once stood in his chamber and been dismissed as unimportant. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. The council accepts, he said. The words tasted like ashes in his mouth. All terms, without reservation? Daniel nodded slowly. Then we have an agreement. Humanity will return. We will rebuild what has been broken. We will restore order to the chaos. But understand this clearly. The galaxy you knew is gone. It died the day you betrayed us. What comes next will be something new. Something built on human foundations. Something that will never again take humanity for granted. He turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. We gave you our trust once, and you threw it away. This time, you will have to earn it. Every single day, for as long as this new order lasts. And if you ever betray us again, there will be no third chance. We will walk away, and we will never come back. The door closed behind him, and the delegates were left alone with the weight of what they had agreed to. The galaxy had been saved, but the price of salvation was everything they had once been. Outside the meeting room, Katie fell into step beside Daniel. "Do you think they will honor the agreement?" Daniel smiled grimly. "They will, because they have no choice. And because deep down they know we are right. They know they failed. They know they need us. That knowledge will keep them honest for a very long time. And after that, we will see. But I think the galaxy has learned its lesson. Some lessons you only need to learn once." The horizon departed from Haven's Rest, carrying word of the agreement back to Earth. Behind it, a galaxy that had been dying began to hope again. The silence was over. Humanity was coming back, but nothing would ever be the same. The vote was unanimous. Every species in the galaxy accepted humanity's terms without a single voice of opposition. They signed the documents and sealed the agreements and handed over their future to the beings they had once dismissed as unimportant newcomers. Within weeks, human ships returned to the stars. They came in waves. First, the engineers who began repairing the broken systems that had crippled so many worlds. Then the doctors who brought medicine and healing to the sick and wounded. Then the soldiers who hunted down the pirates and restored safety to the shipping lanes. Everywhere they went, the humans were welcomed like saviors. Beings who had once looked down on humanity now bowed their heads in gratitude. Children who had grown up hungry watched human cargo ships deliver food to their starving worlds. Parents who had lost hope saw human peacekeepers end the wars that had torn their homes. Apart 1 year after the agreement, the new Galactic Council held its first session. But it did not meet on Nexus Prime. The old council building had become a symbol of failure and corruption. Instead, the new council gathered on Earth. In a gleaming complex built on the shores of a vast blue ocean, President Laura Bradley stood at the central podium and looked out at the assembled delegates. They came from every corner of the galaxy, Corvani and Thelvari. Meridians and members of the Hive Collective, species that had fought wars against each other, now sat side by side in a chamber designed by human architects. "Welcome to Earth," President Bradley said. "Welcome to the new Galactic Council." The delegates listened in respectful silence. No one interrupted. No one whispered to their neighbors. They had learned the cost of disrespecting humanity. 5 years ago, we were betrayed by those we called friends, the president continued. We walked away from a galaxy that had used us and discarded us. We closed our borders and let you face the consequences of your choices. She paused and let her words sink in. Many of you suffered. Many of you died. Your governments fell and your economies collapsed and your worlds burned. We could have stopped it sooner. We chose not to. Some of you may hate us for that choice. You have that right. But you should understand why we made it. Her voice hardened with steel. We made it because you needed to learn. You needed to understand that humanity is not your servant. We are not your tool to be used and thrown away. We are your equals at the very least. And now, because you proved you cannot treat us as equals, we are your leaders. No one objected. No one dared. This council will operate differently than the old one. Human representatives will preside over every session. Human law will form the foundation of all decisions. When there is a dispute, human judgment will settle it. When there is a crisis, human authority will address it. She looked around the chamber at the faces of 100 different species. This is not punishment. This is consequence. You will have your freedom in your own internal matters. Your cultures and traditions will be respected. But the great decisions that affect us all will be made by humanity. And you will accept those decisions without complaint. The delegates nodded their understanding. They had signed the agreements. They knew the terms. There was nothing left to argue about. Work hard, President Bradley concluded. Rebuild your worlds. Earn our trust. And perhaps someday, when you have proven that you can be responsible partners, we will revisit these arrangements. Until then, humanity leads. This session is adjourned. She stepped down from the podium, and the delegates filed out in orderly silence. The new order had officially begun. 5 years passed under human leadership. The galaxy slowly healed. The wars ended. The economies recovered. The systems that had failed were rebuilt stronger than before. Trade flowed freely along routes protected by human patrol ships. Justice was dispensed by courts that followed human legal principles. Some species resented the new order. They whispered in private about human arrogance and unfairness. They dreamed of the old days when the council had been a partnership of equals. But they whispered quietly and they did nothing. They remembered what had happened when humanity walked away. None of them wanted to experience that again. Daniel Harris. Retired from diplomatic service and moved to a small house on the coast of California, he spent his days reading books and tending a garden and watching the waves crash against the shore. The man who had changed the fate of the galaxy now wanted nothing more than peace and quiet. Katie. Morrison visited him sometimes. She had risen high in the new order. Ambassador Morrison now, one of the most powerful diplomats in human history. She handled negotiations with dozens of species and commanded respect wherever she went. One evening they sat together on his porch, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The sky turned orange and pink and purple as the light faded. "Do you ever regret it?" Katie asked. "Walking away all those years ago?" All the suffering that followed. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. He had asked himself that question many times over the years. "I regret that it was necessary," he finally said. "I regret that they forced us into that position. I wish they had simply treated us fairly from the beginning. I wish all those beings had not died in the chaos." He turned to look at her with old, tired eyes that still held a spark of the steel she remembered. But regret the decision itself? No, never. The galaxy needed to learn that humanity matters. That we are not to be taken lightly. That our friendship is valuable and our anger is dangerous. They learned, and now they will never forget. Far away in the depths of space, a young Corvani named Selthan worked aboard a human trading vessel. He was one of the lucky ones. His desperate message years ago had somehow reached the right people. When humanity returned, they had granted him asylum and given him a chance to start over. Now he served alongside humans, learning their ways, studying their history, trying to understand the species that had risen from obscurity to rule the galaxy. The ship's captain was a man named Paul Henderson. He was rough and plain-spoken but fair in his dealings. One day he found Selthan in the cargo bay reading a human history text. "Still trying to figure us out?" Paul asked with a slight smile. "Your species confuses me," Selthan admitted. "You are not the oldest or the strongest or the most numerous. Yet here you are leading everyone else. How did this happen?" Paul settled down on a cargo crate and thought about the question. "I think it is because we are stubborn," he said. "When someone tells us we cannot do something, we do it anyway. When someone hurts us, we do not just get angry. We get even. And then we get better." "But you also help," Selthan said. "Even after everything my people did to yours, you still help us. You saved my life when you had no reason to." "Yeah, well," Paul shrugged. "That is the other thing about humans. We hold grudges, but we do not hold them forever. Give us enough time, and we will forgive almost anything. We remember, but we move forward." He stood up and stretched his back. "Just do not make us walk away again," he added with a serious look. "Because next time, we might not come back. Next time, we might just let the galaxy burn until there is nothing left." Selthan watched him go and thought about those words. He thought about a galaxy that had dismissed humanity as unimportant. He thought about the silence that had followed when the humans left. He thought about the desperate years of war and famine and collapse. He thought about the pleas that had finally brought humanity back. He returned to his reading with new determination. The galaxy's future depended on understanding humanity, on never again making the mistakes that had cost so many lives, on remembering that the quiet, helpful species called humans could become something terrifying when pushed too far. In her office on Earth, President Bradley reviewed reports from across the galaxy. Order had been restored. Peace had been maintained. The new system was working. Her aide entered with a message. "Madam President, the Thelvar delegation is requesting a meeting. They want to discuss expanding trade agreements. Schedule it for next week," Bradley replied. "And make sure they understand that human terms apply." "Yes, Madam President." The aide left, and Bradley turned to look out her window at the city below. Millions of humans going about their daily lives, unaware of the power their species now held. Unaware of the responsibility that power carried, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. The betrayal, the withdrawal, the suffering, the return. It had cost so much. But in the end, humanity had proven something important. The galaxy could not function without them. And now, the galaxy would never forget it. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance across the sky. Somewhere out there, 100 species looked toward Earth and wondered what the humans would do next. They waited with hope and fear and respect, and humanity, as always, simply continued being human. Building and teaching and healing and leading, stubborn and forgiving and dangerous and kind. The species that had walked away from everything and returned to rule it all. The story was not over. Stories never really end. But this chapter had reached its conclusion. The galaxy had learned its lesson. And humanity had taken its rightful place among the stars, not as servants, not as tools, not as junior partners to be used and discarded, but as leaders, as protectors, as the foundation upon which everything else was built. That was the legacy of the Great Silence. That was what the galaxy would remember forever. Humanity walked away once. The entire galaxy froze. And when humanity returned, not